Hello, and welcome to Culturopolis, the show where I give my opinions and reviews on the latest media this month in culture. In May, I took a little bit of a step back in watching some of the most recent movies. I had to focus on some university work, but I was still able to watch a good amount of stuff and some of the bigger blockbusters that released in May. What I did watch in terms of movies was Guardians 3, Sisu, Fast X, and I also watched the Amazon Prime new TV show Citadel starring Richard Madden. I also played the highly anticipated game The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and I also played the Guardians of the Galaxy game from Eidos Montreal. A couple other features include Batman Whatever Happens to the Cape Crusader from Neil Gaiman, and for retro recommendations I'll be looking at Severance and Andor, two very recent shows that I think are just absolutely spectacular. So yeah, without further ado, this is Culturopolis. Starting off, the mastermind that is James Gunn concludes his trilogy and his time with Marvel Studios with this heartfelt, action-packed, emotional, beautiful, spectacular swan song for the Guardians of the Galaxy with Volume 3. After an attack on their home of nowhere, the Guardians must venture across the galaxy to save Rocket. To do so, however, they must find the truth of Rocket's past and come face to face with his maker. The Guardians movies have always been my favourite in the MCU. Their music and action and visual style were all spectacular, but their characters are what kept me hooked. And the characters are the absolute highlight of this movie, to the point where I had tears for a solid portion of the film's runtime. One thing that really stuck out for me was just how emotional this film was. Definitely still funny, absolutely, but this is the movie that had me more emotionally invested and engaged with all the characters. There were complaints over the first two movies that Peter Quill took most of the screen, but I feel like everyone gets their time to shine in Volume 3. The spotlight this time moves more closer to Rocket, and the whole film is about the Guardians learning to accept themselves and love themselves. This is shown through Rocket, of course, who constantly hides from his past, through Peter getting over Gamora, Nebula learning to move on from being the villain she was in the first movie to now the fully fledged member of the Guardians that she is now, and also with Mantis, who has never really had an identity of her own. She's always tied to Ego, and now she's tied to the Guardians. Each of them has something to learn to love about themselves. I have to say, I really love the pairing as well of Drax and Mantis. These two made me laugh the most, and right until the end I was connected with them. And speaking of character, how do you not mention the villain, the High Evolutionary? Chukwudi Iwuji plays an excellent antagonist who is just plain and simple horrid, the most narcissistic, manipulative, and just downright evil person ever depicted in Marvel. It's refreshing to have someone you can really just despise and not also be faced with the moral implications of what they're doing and how, from a certain point of view, they are in the right. No, this man is evil, and also has the best line in the whole movie, which is, "There is no God, that's why I stepped in." Like, that is just spectacular, and really gives you a sense of who this man is and how he thinks of himself. There's also Adam Warlock, who doesn't play as big a role as most others, but what little time he does have is very enjoyable, especially that opening scene. Action overall was also very entertaining and had me hooked. One thing Gunn has always been is experimental, and that is done with the action very well, with lots of fun ideas that will surprise audiences. I did find myself a little detached during the beginning of the final act. There's a dogfight in space that had me a bit lost, but there's a Wanna directly afterwards, which really knocked out the park and was able to restore the engagement I found. Then there's also the music. The Guardians movies have always been well loved for their soundtracks, and the streak continues in the third movie. All of the songs fit very well, and I'm glad Gunn was given more freedom with the music now that Peter had the Zune, which allowed for music from plenty of other decades. Top songs have to be Crazy on You, In the Meantime, and The Dog Days Are Over. Specifically, the scene where The Dog Days Are Over plays is just perfect. Guardians 3 is an extremely fun time with characters that had me laughing and crying throughout, especially considering the near decade-long connection I've had to them. This is a perfect ending to a perfect trilogy, and now, honestly, I'm going to be putting all my eggs into the DCU because James Gunn knows how to tell a story, and this movie is proof of that. The same way the horror genre went through the slasher, then the gore porn, and the found footage eras, the action genre is going through a John Wick era recently. We saw this with Nobody, starring Bob Odenkirk, Violent Night, starring David Harbour. You could even argue Chris Hemsworth's Extraction fit into this. And the latest among this subgenre of action movies is Sisu. A retired Finnish soldier takes work as a gold miner, and when set to deliver his most recent deposit of gold, he bumps into an entire Nazi division. When attempting to steal the gold from him, they find he's not just an average soldier. Instead, he's a one-man army, with determination that will let nothing stop him from his goal. Sisu is very fun. It's a good, entertaining action movie, which I feel hit every spot it needed to, and didn't take too much time to do it. The story isn't very complex, but it is very entertaining. The focus on this badass old Finnish man, almost like a Doom guy, just berserking through these Nazis, is fantastic to watch. Plus, the side story of the captured women I thought was also well done. Their role in the final act particularly was good. It didn't take too much away from the main character, but it still gave them time to shine. The cinematography was also well done. I loved how the filmmakers captured Lapland and its beautiful landscapes. It really makes you detest the Nazis even more for destroying this beautiful country. Now, the action can make or break a movie of this sort, and it is mostly very good. It all felt very exciting. I was surprised by what happened a lot of the time. To me, each set piece was almost like a puzzle, and we watched how the main character found a solution. Where it didn't work so much for me was the editing. A few scenes suffer from far too many cuts. It can often be a bit confusing what's happening on screen, plus a few other editing choices, certain shots which confuse me, and some digital zooms and rough CGI just kind of hindered the experience a little bit. I only say this because when you have a film of this sort, it relies so heavily on what you see in its action, so I have to nitpick a little bit. But Sisu is well worth your time, especially if you're a fan of John Wick and killing Nazis. Perfect. It is a very Finnish film, and honestly deserved far more attention than it actually received. The final film I watched was Fast X. After Dominic Toretto and his family are threatened by a man that they crossed once before, he must venture across the globe to stop those who stand against him and protect his family. Now, I've never seen a Fast and Furious movie. I never intended to see a Fast and Furious movie. I never thought I would watch Fast X initially when I first watched the trailer, but then I thought it would be really funny to watch the 11th movie in a franchise that I have no connection with and see what I thought. And it was just very bland. I may at one point watch all the other Fast and Furious movies, but after this, I already have had my fill. To sum up my thoughts, really, like, Fast X is like non-fat Greek yogurt, you know? It's like, it's alright, but I'm not going to go in for more. Getting the positive stuff out of the way, Jason Momoa is the villain. Whatever his name is, he's fantastic. He's the definition of eccentric. His charisma definitely holds the whole film together, in my opinion, and that is just what kept me entertained. The rest of the cast really felt one-dimensional, and everyone just had to be a badass, whereas instead with Momoa, you can really tell he's just having fun. All of the action really is nothing but schlock. You forget it right after it happens. A couple of the stunts, I guess you could call them, were good, but I really doubt they were stunts and not just CGI. The film looks okay for the most part, but the writing is the worst aspect of it. It happens a couple times where Dom is told, you're off the grid, you cannot contact your family, and in the very next scene, he contacts them. Literally, the next scene. Then there's one scene that features Pete Davidson in London for some reason, which is quite literally pointless. Nothing happens. They go talk to Pete Davidson for a bit, shout, then leave. That is it. Scenes like this make the almost 2.5 hour runtime feel like a bit of a drag, and pacing around the halfway mark really grinds to a halt. If you are already a fan of the Fast movies, I'm guessing you will like this, but if you are like me and have yet to step into this family, I really doubt there is much for you here. Over May, I watched Amazon Prime's latest hit action spy thriller Citadel, starring Richard Madden, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, and Stanley Tucci. We were introduced to the spy organisation of Citadel as they battle the terrorist group known as Manticore. One of their greatest spies, Mason Kane, loses his memory and is cut from the life he once led, before being dragged back to stop Manticore with the help of his long-lost lover and fellow spy, Nadia. Now, I was really looking forward to this series, and for one reason in particular, and that is that the Russo brothers were a part of it. It was my assumption that they were writing or directing, but instead they are just producing, which really means nothing, but it allows their names to be slapped on posters and trailers. It's a shame because I would have loved to have seen what they would do with a proper spy movie or series ever since Captain America the Winter Soldier, which was a great superhero movie, but also at the same time a really good spy movie. Instead, what we get here is very lackluster. I really don't like the characters, for one, and I don't think that it is at the fault of the actors. Richard Madden is an amazing actor. I haven't seen much of anything Priyanka Chopra Jonas is in, but I'm sure she's great. But the scripts that they were given here just did not have that wow factor. Compare this show to Mission Impossible, which it clearly takes a lot of inspiration from, especially the later movies in the franchise. Those movies rely heavily on their action and stunts, and that works because Tom Cruise goes above and beyond, sacrificing his own health to get it done on a blockbuster scale. Citadel does not have a blockbuster budget. In fact, let me just quickly check the budget of this series. $250 million. Wow. I really did not think this had a $250 million budget. That did not come across at all. But either way, the action just does not equate to Mission Impossible. Richard Madden clearly is not stressing himself when it comes to the stunts. In fact, I would say Priyanka Chopra Jonas has far more screen time when it comes to stunts and choreographed set pieces. Firmly believe Citadel was a waste of money and time, both to watch it and to produce it, especially considering that budget. My god. What you have here is a very generic spy drama, which misses the mark with what you would expect, let alone anything that would surprise you. Possibly my most anticipated piece of media this year, released in the month of May, just 2 days after my birthday, and that is The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Following on from the critically acclaimed Breath of the Wild, Link and Zelda discover a gloom that protrudes underneath Hyrule Castle, and in a shocking turn of events, an ancient evil is let loose. Zelda is lost, and islands rise from the ground. It's up to the player to venture out, using your new abilities to discover what has happened across Hyrule and stop the evil Ganondorf. Firstly, to establish where I am in the game, because I have not nearly finished it. I am 60 to 65 hours in, and I've done 80 shrines, completed the Rito village quest, and I have done all the Dragon Tears. And yet, I still feel as though I have barely scratched the surface of this game. It is huge, arguably an overwhelming amount, but it is still fun to explore and to venture out. The open world is 3 times bigger than the previous game, and even more packed with things to do. It is amazing to see what the team has accomplished in the last 5 years, and you really become lost in this open world, which without a doubt succeeds Breath of the Wild. The story elements are much more developed also. Characters in the main quest as well as side quests have much more involvement in gameplay and puzzles, which is very refreshing and adds another level of polish to the game. The gameplay is also heavily reliant on the new abilities, which are very much welcome in my opinion. I'm in love with the Master Hand ability, which allows you to make anything your heart desires. One shrine in particular has you facing a sea of sand, and you have to craft a speedboat to cross it. I remember doing this shrine and just thinking, how have they done this? You know, it further pushes the player to think for themselves and to make their own particular solutions to each problem they face, which is synonymous with Breath of the Wild. I simply cannot wait to dig even deeper into this game and to see the full extent of its story as well. But I feel I have a very long and very fun way to go before I finish. So after watching Guardians 3, I was in a bit of a Guardians of the Galaxy mood. So, over May, if I wasn't watching something, doing work, or playing Tears of the Kingdom, I was playing Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy from Eidos Montreal. Playing as the team leader Star-Lord, you command the Guardians of the Galaxy. After a job to pay off a fine to the Nova Corps, the Guardians accidentally unleash an evil creature that plans to enslave the entire galaxy. On the journey to stop the creature, you come across a wide variety of characters, both from the comics and completely original for this action third-person shooter. The game tries its best with its story and characters to move away from the widely popular movies, which in my opinion is the best move. It adds something fresh for the wider audience that they aren't accustomed to, but also keeps comic fans of the Guardians happy. Each of the Guardians feels different enough from their movie counterparts and yet are still recognisable as those characters, unlike the Avengers game, which were more blatant cutouts of the characters in the MCU, in my opinion. Gameplay is very engaging. You always play as Star-Lord and have a varied moveset which is fun on its own, but you are then given control over the other Guardians through set abilities. These can be used in combat with a variety that allows for combinations and choices no matter what set of enemies are around, but can also be used in the game's puzzles. For example, Rocket can hack computers, whilst Groot can use his branches to elevate platforms, and even more. The main issue I have with this game is the writing. On the most part it's serviceable, and even surpassing the movies at points. But a lot of the time I found myself more annoyed with the team's decisions as they had no reason or sensible motivation behind them. But if you are a fan of these characters, if that is a hardcore comics nerd, or just a fan of the movies, then you will love this game. Its action and style are very fresh, with its Lovecraftian aesthetic, and you'll grow to love the team that the developers crafted, even if the writing is a little rough around the edges sometimes. As a birthday gift, I was given plenty of comics, and the first I read, which I'm talking about this month, is Batman: Whatever Happened to the Caped Crusader. This comes from the absolute legend Neil Gaiman, who takes a shot at the Dark Knight to tell a story of what would happen if Batman died, and how would his ensemble of friends and enemies react. This is a very nice short story. It takes place over 2 issues to commemorate 70 years since the character of Batman had been conceived. Gaiman does an excellent job to present a mystery to the audience, because it's clear early on that not everything is what it seems. Each story from valued members of Batman's history and the DC universe are very entertaining to read and pay tribute to the stories that came before. This is also the same with the art style. The designs of Batman, Joker, Catwoman, and other characters shift throughout as a homage to previous adaptations of the characters. This all culminates in an ending which really captures the character of Bruce Wayne, everything he stood for, and how Batman is one of the most interesting characters in fiction. How he sacrifices everything to ensure that there is a beaming ray of hope for Gotham. If there was ever a definitive end to Batman, then this is how it should be done. And that's everything I consumed over the month. Now it's time for retro recommendations, pieces of media from the past few decades or even years that I think deserve some love today. This month I'm going to talk about some very recent series that I think are phenomenal, starting off with Severance. This show stars Adam Scott as Mark S., an employee at a megacorporation which requires him to be severed, resulting in complete detachment from his work life. His outside life and memories of it are completely erased while at work, and he has no memory of what happens at work after leaving. This dystopian nightmare tackles the morality of such an idea and how a corporate institution keeps its secrets. This show is a masterpiece in my opinion. The cinematography is like nothing I've ever seen, and truly remarkable how they experiment with how they portray not only the act of severing, but also the office space itself, and it leaves the audience to interpret and to make connections. It reminds me of the Overlook Hotel from The Shining, where nothing really makes sense and you wonder if it's all intentional, and if so, for what purpose. The main 4 employees we watch are all very intricate, even though we mostly follow Mark both in and out of Lumen. The whole team are layered and are relatable, and they're all relatable, trapped in this hellish environment, and by the end, without giving anything away, you are rooting for them to escape, even though there really is no actual escape for them. The whole concept is inspired by the Stanley Parable, which I also love, and the series really depends on the mystery around it. You are constantly looking and wanting for answers, but that is also the series' greatest flaw, as the major cliffhanger ending leaves you desperate for more, yet with the well-needed writer's strike and behind-the-scenes conflicts, it looks to be a while before we see a new season. Still, do give it a watch, because what is delivered is well worth your time and is, on its own, a very well-crafted story. Finally, I'm going to be discussing Andor. This came out last year, and Mandalorian Season 3 really should take some notes. 5 years before the events of Rogue One, we meet Cassian Andor, your average no-good thug who does odd jobs around the galaxy. On the search for his sister, he is targeted by a security police force and a rebel leader. On the run and in need of a way out, he starts his career as a rebel against the Empire. Hands down, this is the best piece of Star Wars media out there. I'm saying all the movies, series, cartoons, games, comics, novels, all of them are trumped by Andor. And what's most remarkable is that not a single lightsaber is ignited. I wasn't even a big fan of Rogue One, mainly because I couldn't connect with the characters, but Andor absolutely kills it with the cast on display. Whether it's the heroes or the villains or the individuals who are more in between, everyone has a clear identity. They feel real in this otherwise mystical world. The political drama that takes place is also interesting. We're able to see it from all angles. The lower streets of crime with Cassian, the emerging rebellion on Coruscant with Luthen and Mon Mothma, your average worker and servant to the system with Cyril, and all the way into the upper ranks of Imperial government with Dedra Meero, played by the wonderful Denise Gough, who is also best known for playing Yennefer in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Everything is so real with this story and these characters. They really took the time to flesh out all of the plot points so that not only is everything engaging and thrilling, but everything is also important to the grand scheme of things. The writing is spectacular. I'm not going to spoil a thing. The structure of the whole season is done beautifully, splitting into subplots of 3 episodes, which keeps the whole season contained and paced very smoothly. My favourite, like many others, has to be the Narkina 5 trilogy of episodes. Everything in those is so interesting, it's so gripping, and yet at the same time it's terrifying and heartbreaking, especially when you consider the greater implications which were revealed later on. So overall, yeah, watch Andor. Even if you're not a big fan of Star Wars, watch Andor. It may be a slow start at first, but if you push through, you'll find something absolutely super. So that is everything for me. Like I said, it's been a shorter episode, didn't get to watch too much with work and stuff, but I was happy for the most part with everything that I saw, and I cannot wait for June. We've got Across the Spider-Verse and Flash, both of which I have already seen, but I have a lot to talk about with those, and I cannot wait. Then there's also other things like The Boogeyman, which is a Stephen King adaptation, and also War Pony, which is a bit of a smaller film, not too much promotion about it, but I did really enjoy that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that weirdness. And I hope you have a very good month. Bye bye.